We're now looking at the types of flowers. We have two types of flowers. We have the wind pollinated flowers and the insect pollinated flowers. We shall start by looking at the wind pollinated flowers. Wind pollinated flowers are those flowers which are not coloredly or brightly colored. If you look at them, you will see that this is a wind pollinated flower, but looking at the color, you will see they are not brightly colored. Then they have another characteristic, is that they are very small and inconspicuous. They have an inconspicuous perianth. Their calyx and their corolla, they are very small and inconspicuous. They also don't produce any scent because these are wind pollinated flowers. They are just pollinated by wind, so there is no scent that is produced, because we know that the scent is produced to attract the pollinating agents, but because these ones are pollinated by wind, they do not produce any scent. Neither do they produce any nectar. Don't produce nectar because they do not undergo pollination that requires the pollinating agent to come and do the pollination. Therefore, they do not produce nectar, but they produce a large quantity of pollen. The reason is that when the pollen is blown by the wind, at least some of the pollen will land on the stigma. So that's why they produce a large quantity of pollen grains. And they are light and smooth. That is the pollen of the wind pollinated flower. It's light and smooth. The stamen has a long filament. The purpose that this long filament helps the transfer of pollen grains to the position whereby they can be blown by the wind, and then they can move to the stigma. So they have a long filament which supports the anthers in a position where they can easily be blown such that the pollen is transferred to the stigma. Another characteristic is that they have also a long style which is placed in a position such that it supports the stigma and places the stigma in a position whereby the stigma can easily attract or absorb any of the pollen that is available. They have a large and a feathery stigma. The stigma of wind pollinated flower is large to allow to give a wide large surface area for the dropping of the pollen grains, and it is feathery also to attach or get hold of the pollen grains that lands on it. So we have seen the characteristics of wind pollinated flowers. We have said that they are inconspicuous, they are very small, they do not produce colored petals, they do not produce any scent, they don't produce any bright colors. They have a large and feathery stigma. They have a long style. They have a stamen which has long filaments. They produce a large quantity of pollen, and also we have seen that they don't produce any scent, neither do they produce any nectar. Now, when we look at the characteristics of insect pollinated flowers, these are quite the opposite of the wind pollinated flowers. For them, they produce brightly colored corollas. Those are the petals are brightly colored to attract the pollinating agents. They are conspicuous with colored bracts. They are scented, that is, they produce scent to attract the pollinating agents. They are rough, spiky surface pollen grains. They produce rough, spike surface pollen grains such that this pollen grain can attach itself to the pollinating agent when the pollinating agent comes to pick nectar, and then it can be transferred to the stigma. They have a sticky stigma. This surface, which is sticky, it helps on trapping the pollen grain that is on any part of the body of the pollinating agent that comes into contact with the stigma. Then the petals from landing, they form a landing plate. The petals of insect pollinated flowers, they form a landing plate where the insects land when they have come to carry out pollination, or when they have come to pick nectar. So these petals, they form a landing plate where they fall, the insects fall. Then the nectaries are at the end of the long corolla tube. Nectar is at the end of the long corolla tube, such that the pollinating agent can go and pick the nectar, and then it can trap others or the pollens, and then when it is coming out, the pollen can be attached to the stigma surface. So those are the characteristics of insect pollinated flowers. They produce brightly colored corolla. They are conspicuous with colored bracts. They have a scent, which is a good scent, which attracts the pollinating agents. They have a rough spike surface of the pollen grain, which helps it to attach itself to the hair or the body part of the pollinating agents. They have a sticky surface stigma, which attracts and traps all the pollen grain that is on the animal part that hatches on it. They have petals that act as landing sites for the insects that have come to collect the nectar, and the nectaries are situated in such a way that they can allow the pollinating agent to go down and pick the nectar, and in the process of picking nectar, they will come across the pollen grains, and then the pollen will be transferred by the body parts, and when they come near the stigma, the pollen grains are transferred to the stigma, and fertilization takes place. Thank you.